To him, she was invisible, a piece of the worn-out scenery. He looked right through the young woman who worked at the dilapidated diner, seeing only a servant desperate enough to grovel for a tip. Alejandro Valente, the most feared capo in New York, found her very existence amusing. He held out a perfect, crisp $100 bill, dangling the money before her as if she were an animal to be trained. This is what true power looks like, the ability to protect yourself from anyone and anything. But what he failed to anticipate was the moment she closed the distance between them. He never imagined she would whisper a name his family had spent 2 decades burying under layers of blood and silence. In one stunning, heart-stopping second, the predator became the prey. The real question is not what she knows, but who she is. And how did this forgotten girl uncover the secrets that could shatter the entire Valente empire? You may think you understand this story, but you are not prepared for the truth. Keep watching. The relentless Seattle rain did nothing to cleanse the city. Instead, it just made the layers of urban grime feel colder and more permanent. Inside a diner that never closed, the overhead fluorescent tubes hummed with a grating, painful sound. They bathed the checkered linoleum floors in a sickly yellow light, revealing scuff marks from the 1990s that had never been scrubbed away. For what seemed like the 20th time that hour, Mia Collins swiped a saturated rag across the countertop's surface. A deep, persistent ache radiated from her wrist. She was only 24 years old, but on endless nights like this one, her body felt closer to 50. The diner was a ghost town. A single truck driver was sound asleep in a booth, his head resting on the table next to a half-finished plate of apple pie. From a dark corner, the low murmurs of a couple's bitter argument drifted through the air. And then, the bell above the entrance did more than just jingle. Its sharp chime seemed to change the atmospheric pressure in the room, heralding a significant arrival. 3 men walked in. They were profoundly out of place. These men were designed for the opulent penthouses of gleaming skyscrapers, for the silent, armored interiors of luxury cars. They belonged in environments where the air was thick with the smells of expensive cologne and gun oil, a world away from the stale stench of burnt coffee and rancid fryer grease. The man positioned in the middle was their anchor, a human center of gravity pulling everything toward him. He was a tall man, wearing a charcoal suit that was easily worth more than the diner's profits for an entire year. His hair was the color of polished obsidian, flawlessly swept back from his brow. His eyes were the shade of cold espresso, dark and bitter, and taking in every detail around him with an unnerving intensity. This was Alejandro Valente. Mia did not need to see his picture on the evening news to recognize him. She could feel the aura of danger radiating from him, a tangible heat like the wave from a freshly opened furnace. He was the unquestioned successor to the Valente crime syndicate, the newly appointed Don, tasked with managing all operations on the West Coast. With an effortless grace, he slid into a booth right next to the window. His 2 bodyguards positioned themselves with a quiet, lethal efficiency, subtly blocking both the front and back exits without appearing to do so. Mia inhaled a slow, measured breath. She smoothed the front of her faded apron with her hands and then picked up her order pad. "He is just a customer," she chanted in her mind, a desperate mantra. "All you have to do is pour his coffee, write down his order, and make it to the end of your shift." She began her walk toward their table, careful to keep her eyes downcast, though every muscle in her body was coiled tight with tension. "Coffee." Alejandro's voice cut through the silence as he finally looked up at her. He offered no smile. He examined her with the detached scrutiny a man might give a small scratch on the paint of his prized Ferrari. She was a minor, annoying imperfection in his world. His gaze traveled over the frayed edges of her uniform, lingered on the dark, exhausted circles beneath her eyes, and finally rested on the cheap plastic name tag pinned crookedly to her chest. "3 coffees black, and I expect that the pot was not brewed yesterday," Alejandro instructed. His voice was a rich baritone, but it was layered with the unmistakable weight of absolute command. "A fresh pot is already on. It will be ready in 2 minutes," Mia responded, her own voice remarkably calm and even. One of the bodyguards, a hulking man named Rocco, let out a harsh, unpleasant laugh. "She's got a little fire in her, boss." Alejandro's mouth twisted into a cruel, condescending smirk. He reached into the pocket of his tailored suit jacket and produced a thick, gleaming money clip. With a slow, theatrical gesture, he peeled off a brand new, perfectly flat $100 bill and placed it on the table's sticky surface. He then separated another bill from the stack, and then a third. "I have a feeling you can figure out a way to make that coffee appear a little more quickly if you put your mind to it," Alejandro said, his words drawn out in a lazy, insulting tone. He tapped a flawlessly manicured finger on the pile of money. "That is likely more than you earn in a whole week, is it not, sweetheart? How about you do a little dance for us? Show us a pretty smile. If you perform well, maybe I will leave you a tip generous enough to fix that mess on top of your head." It was a textbook display of power, a humiliation tactic he had certainly perfected through years of dealing with those he deemed insignificant. He clearly anticipated a blush, a stammered apology, and a desperate scramble for the money with trembling hands. But Mia just looked at the cash. Then, she raised her head and met Alejandro's gaze directly. She did not blush. On the contrary, any warmth in her expression evaporated, replaced by an astonishing icy coldness. "I am a waitress, Mr. Valenti," Mia stated, her voice lowering and shedding every trace of polite customer service. "I am not here for your entertainment, and there is nothing at all wrong with my hair." The silence that crashed down on the table was sudden and total. It was so heavy it felt like a physical presence. Rocco's jaw was literally hanging open in disbelief. Alejandro's mocking smirk vanished completely, replaced by a look of pure shock that quickly morphed into a flash of deep personal offense. "You know who I am," Alejandro said softly. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "Everyone knows your name," Mia lied, her gaze unwavering. She pivoted sharply on her heel. "Your coffee will be out in exactly 2 minutes." She walked away, her heart hammering against her ribs like a panicked bird trapped in a cage. She knew she had made a terrible mistake by provoking him. The intelligent move was to endure the insults, accept the money, and simply go home. But she was so incredibly tired. She was exhausted from years of running, of looking over her shoulder. Seeing him sitting there, so arrogant, so powerful, and so undeniably alive while her own father was nothing but dust in a forgotten grave in New Jersey, it caused something deep inside her to fracture. She returned carrying the fresh pot of coffee. She poured with a hand that was perfectly steady, despite the intense sensation of 3 pairs of eyes burning into her back. Just as she finished filling Alejandro's cup, he moved with lightning speed, his hand clamping around her wrist. His grip was like a steel manacle, but his touch was not yet violent. It was about possession, about absolute control. "You have a very sharp tongue," Alejandro murmured, his dark eyes boring into hers, searching for the fear he expected to find. "I have a strong dislike for sharp things. They have a bad habit of cutting people." "Then perhaps you should not touch them," Mia whispered in return. Alejandro let out a dark, mirthless laugh. "Oh, I am sure you want the money. You are just playing a game to get more. I will make you a deal. Tell me something interesting and the tip is yours. But if you bore me, Rocco over there is going to send you through that plate glass window." To him, this was nothing more than a diversion. It was another cruel, meaningless game. Mia looked down at the powerful hand encircling her wrist. She saw the absolute certainty of a man who had never once in his entire life faced a genuine consequence for any of his actions. "Something interesting?" she repeated, her voice perfectly composed. "Surprise me." Mia leaned forward then, deliberately invading his personal space, moving closer than anyone would ever have the courage to. He caught the faint scent of vanilla and old books coming from her. "Ask your father what really happened to the Victoria Ledger back in 1998, she whispered, her voice so soft it was barely more than a breath. "And when you are done with that, Ask him why he failed to check the trunk of the blue sedan before he sent it to the crusher. She pulled back from him slowly. The color drained from Alejandro Valente's face so fast, it was as if he had been struck by a bullet. In the diner's dim lighting, his pupils expanded into black pools of shock. All the arrogance, all the untouchable power, it completely dissolved from his expression. What replaced it was a raw, primitive terror. The Victoria Ledger, the blue sedan. These were not pieces of public information. They were not stories you could uncover in some dusty newspaper archive. They were the Valente family's darkest, most blood-soaked secrets. They were truths that only 3 people on the entire planet had ever known, and 2 of them were already in their graves. "Who are you?" Alejandro rasped, his voice trembling with an uncontrollable mix of raw fury and absolute dread. Mia calmly placed the check on the table beside his hand, which still had not moved. "The coffee refill is free. My advice, however, is going to cost you extra." Alejandro did not reach for his coffee. He simply stared at the waitress, at Mia, as she retreated to the relative safety behind the counter. His mind was a violent storm, tearing through fragmented memories and old family whispers, things his father had warned him his entire life to never, ever mention. The Victoria Ledger was not just some book. It was the physical proof that the Valente family had stolen the mayoral election in the late 90s. It also contained the signed hit order for a federal judge. That ledger was supposed to have been reduced to ash more than 2 decades ago, his model. His father, the old Don, had sworn on his life that the Victoria Ledger was ash. He had promised him it was destroyed. And the blue sedan. That was the car they used, the one where they supposedly handled the accountant who dared to steal from their family. If this young woman knew about that car, then she knew exactly where the skeletons were hidden. The boss's name was spoken, a low and urgent whisper from Rocco. "Boss?" His hand was already moving, a shadow drifting toward the inside of his coat, where steel and leather waited. "She showed you no respect. Give me the word, and I will take care of this problem." Alejandro's voice was sharp, a whip crack in the quiet diner. "Do not move." His gaze remained locked on Mia, who was now scrubbing a dinner plate with a detached calm. She acted as if she had not just detonated a bomb in the very center of his world. "Nobody will touch her. If she dies, everything she knows dies with her. Or worse, it all goes public." With a surge of energy, Alejandro rose from his seat. "Get everyone out of this diner." Rocco hesitated. "Boss?" Alejandro's roar filled the small space, raw and furious. "I said clear the damn room now!" He slammed his palm down on the table, the impact so severe that the forks and knives jumped in momentary fright. Instantly, Rocco and the other guard, Dante, became instruments of their boss's will. They moved toward the sleeping truck driver and the bickering couple near the window. They showed them guns tucked into their waistbands and presented badges that were utterly fake. Within moments, they had pushed the terrified civilians out of the warm diner and into the cold, unforgiving rain of the night. Mia never once looked away from her task. She continued to wash the same plate, her motions steady and repetitive. Once the front door was securely locked and the blinds were drawn shut, Alejandro made his way to the counter. The atmosphere inside the small diner grew thick and heavy, the air becoming difficult to breathe. He commanded her, "Turn around." Mia gently placed the plate into the soapy water, the sound soft in the tense silence. She turned to face him, her body language casual and defiant. She rested a hip against the cold steel of the counter and folded her arms across her chest. She seemed impossibly small against the backdrop of the industrial kitchen equipment, but her eyes held a fire, a deep and unnerving courage that unsettled him to his core. "You just chased away my customers," Mia said, her voice even and calm. "You do realize that money comes out of my tips, do you not?" Alejandro leaned in close. "I could purchase this entire city block this very minute, and then I could burn it all to the ground just for the warmth." His voice was a low growl. He leaned further across the counter, deliberately invading her personal space. Stop with these childish games. Tell me who sent you. Was it the Russos? Is it the Federal Bureau of Investigation? Mia's voice remained steady, a calm island in his sea of rage. Nobody sent me. I am just a waitress trying to make a living. In a sudden explosion of fury, Alejandro swept an entire rack of clean glasses off the counter. They hit the floor and erupted in a deafening crash, a chaotic symphony of shattering crystal. The sound only made Mia flinch, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Waitresses do not know about something called the Victoria Ledger, he seethed. That name has not been spoken by anyone in over 2 decades. She shot back, completely unfazed by his outburst. Maybe you are just talking to the wrong people. Alejandro stared at her, his thoughts racing, trying to solve the puzzle she presented. He knew he had to be smarter. Raw violence was a hammer, but this situation required the precision of a surgeon's knife. He took a long, calming breath, adjusted the cuffs of his expensive shirt, and deliberately forced himself to regain control. The predator was calm once more. You should know, he began, his voice dropping to a smooth, menacing purr, that people who learn things about my family often find their lives become very short. Accidents are always happening. A car's brakes can suddenly fail. A house can mysteriously develop a gas leak. Is that supposed to be some kind of a threat, Mr. Valente? It is merely a weather forecast, he replied. Mia let out a short, brittle laugh that contained no humor whatsoever. You actually believe that I am afraid to die? You cannot possibly imagine the things I have already survived. But you have everything in the world to lose. Your entire criminal empire is built on a foundation of lies. And I know precisely where to push to make it all collapse into dust. Alejandro studied her face, searching for something familiar, a ghost of a feature he could not quite identify. She had green eyes, a stunning and unforgettable shade of emerald. Where had he seen those exact same eyes before? What is it that you want? Alejandro finally asked, his voice tight with strain. Is it money? We have more than you could ever spend. I can write you a check right now for an amount that would let you disappear to any corner of the world you desire. Mia snarled, the words dripping with a poison that had been brewing for years. Keep your money! For a brief, unguarded second, the mask of the simple waitress slipped away, revealing a wound so profound it could never be healed. I do not want your family's blood money. Alejandro let out a harsh, barking laugh that bounced off the cheap tiled walls. Then what could you possibly want from me? His voice was filled with genuine disbelief. She whispered the word, so quiet it was almost lost in the hum of the old refrigerator. Justice. Justice? He shook his head, a slow, condescending motion. In this city, you are living in a dream world. Perhaps I am, she answered, her gaze unwavering. Or perhaps I have just learned to be very, very patient. With a slow and deliberate movement, Mia reached her hand under the counter. In a flash of polished metal, both Rocco and Dante had their firearms drawn, the barrels aimed directly at her heart. Take it easy, boys, Mia said, her hands freezing in the air. I am only reaching for a cigarette. She moved with agonizing slowness now, pulling out a crumpled pack of cheap menthol cigarettes and a simple plastic lighter. She lit one, the small flame trembling in her hand, and exhaled a long plume of smoke that drifted up toward the slowly turning ceiling fan. You have 24 hours, Mia declared, her voice now as cold and precise as a surgical tool. For what? Alejandro demanded, his amusement evaporating into thin air. Go to the police department. Confess to every crime your father ever committed. Tell them the truth about what happened to Arthur Collins. Alejandro's entire body went stiff. Arthur Collins. The name struck him like a physical blow. The accountant, the man who had vanished along with the ledger, the man who had been driving the blue sedan. He stared at Mia, but he was truly seeing her for the very first time. He traced the lines of her face in his mind, the stubborn set of her jaw, the sharp angle of her nose, and those unforgettable, haunting green eyes. Collins. Alejandro breathed, the name a ghost on his lips. You are his daughter. The horrifying realization crashed over him like an icy wave. You are the little girl, the one who managed to get away. Mia gave no response. Her silence was a louder and more damning confession than any words could ever be. My father spent 10 years looking for you, Alejandro said, his voice a strange mixture of shock and a terrible kind of respect. He was certain you had died somewhere in the foster care system. He wished that I had died, Mia corrected him, her voice flat, an empty vessel devoid of all emotion. But I did not die. I endured. I waited for this moment. I watched your family from the shadows for years. And now, after all this time, I am the one who is serving you coffee. The immense weight of his situation finally settled upon Alejandro. This was not some simple betrayal by a low-level associate. This was a vendetta. It was a carefully constructed plan for revenge, 2 decades in the making, carried out by a young woman who had absolutely nothing else to lose. Killing her was impossible. He knew with absolute certainty that if she had planned this for so long, she would have arranged for a dead man's switch, some kind of automatic failsafe. If she failed to make contact with someone, every dark secret of the Valente family would be released to the internet, to every news station, and to every law enforcement agency in the country. Do you honestly believe you can blackmail the Valente family? Alejandro asked, his voice dangerously low as he began to move from behind the end of the counter. He started to walk toward her, a predator slowly circling its cornered prey. I am not blackmailing you, Mia said, but he saw the slight tremble in the hand that held her cigarette as he narrowed the gap between them. I am giving you one last opportunity to cleanse your soul. He stopped, standing just inches in front of her. The air between them was thick with the scent of her fear, a sharp metallic note hidden beneath the sweet vanilla fragrance of the diner. He could feel the terror radiating from her in waves, yet she still refused to look away. He had to give her credit for that. He hated it, but he had to admire her courage. My soul was bought and paid for a very long time ago, Cara, Alejandro whispered, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. But yours? Yours is still on the market. He reached out, his fingers deftly closing around the cigarette. He plucked it from between her lips and casually flicked it into the nearby sink, where it sizzled and died with a hiss. Grab her, Alejandro ordered his men. Mia's eyes widened with genuine panic. What? If you put a hand on me, the email is sent. The news media, the federal government, everyone will get everything. I am counting on it, Alejandro said, his face a grim mask. But I cannot allow you to simply walk away from here. You are coming with me. No, she gasped, her hand flying toward a small paring knife on a magnetic strip next to the sink. But Alejandro was faster. He caught her wrists in a powerful grip, slamming them down onto the counter and trapping her there with the full weight of his body. He pressed her down against the cold, hard steel. A bizarre and powerful current, a jolt of pure, raw energy, shot through both of them at the point of contact. It was not just about violence, it was something more. A dangerous, volatile, and deeply toxic chemistry. Let me go, she screamed, fighting against his overwhelming strength. Not a chance in hell, Alejandro growled close to her ear. Rocco, bring the car around to the back alley. We are going for a little drive. Where are we going, boss? Dante asked as he put his weapon away. Alejandro looked down at the woman trapped beneath him, his dark eyes burning into hers. We are going to the safe house, he said. If she knows about the sedan, then she knows where the bodies are. I have to find out what other secrets are locked inside that beautiful little head of hers before I decide whether I am going to kiss her or kill her. The car ride was suffocatingly silent and tense. Mia was shoved into the back of a black, armored sport utility vehicle, pinned between Alejandro's solid frame and the reinforced door. Her hands remained untied. Alejandro wanted to avoid any complications if they were pulled over. The threat, however, hung in the air, unspoken but absolute. She could only stare out the window, watching as the brilliant city lights smeared into long streaks of color. Before long, the warm glow of the city faded behind them, replaced by the deep, oppressive shadows of the winding roads that climbed up toward the desolate coastal cliffs. The safe house. She knew of this place only from the stories her father wrote down in his careful, detailed notes. It was a place of shadows, secrets, and endings, but she had never seen it with her own eyes until this moment. This is a profound and terrible mistake, Mia thought, feeling the desperate, frantic beat of her own heart against the cage of her ribs. "You are making a mistake," Mia finally said out loud, forcing the words into the tense space between them. Her eyes were fixed on the impenetrable darkness rushing past the car window. "My contact is supposed to receive a call from me before midnight." "It is only 10 o'clock," Alejandro replied, his voice calm and even. He casually glanced at his wrist, at a Patek Philippe watch encrusted with diamonds that threw tiny, sharp shards of light around the car's dim interior. "That leaves us with 2 full hours to have a conversation." "There is absolutely nothing for us to talk about," she countered, her voice sharp with defiance. "There is always something to negotiate," Alejandro said smoothly, a predator at ease. He slowly turned his head, his gaze tracing her silhouette as it was illuminated by the passing street lamps. She possessed a sharp mind, a striking beauty, and a deep, tragic sadness. "Tell me, why did you not simply go to the authorities? Why come looking for me? What was the purpose of that entire dramatic performance back in the diner?" At last, Mia turned to face him directly. "Because the police are in your pocket, Alejandro. We both understand that is the reality of this city. Captain Miller, Judge Henderson, every single one of them has been feeding from your family's table for decades." Alejandro gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent admission that she was right. "True," he murmured, his voice low. "So instead, you came to the devil himself and asked him to save you." "I came to find out if the son was as completely corrupt as the father," she responded, her voice falling to a near whisper, filled with a cold intensity. The car began to slow down, executing a sharp turn that took them through a pair of immense, beautifully crafted iron gates. This supposed safe house was in truth a fortress, skillfully designed to look like a modern, elegant mansion. Its walls were constructed from reinforced concrete, its windows were made of bulletproof glass, and armed security guards patrolled the grounds, accompanied by snarling Rottweilers straining at their leashes. The car descended a steep ramp, entering a vast, echoing underground garage. Rocco moved to open her door for her. "Take her upstairs to the library," Alejandro commanded his subordinate. "And bring us something to drink. Get the good scotch." Mia found herself escorted into a large room that was saturated with the heavy smells of old leather books, expensive cigar smoke, and something that felt like slow decay. The entire space was overwhelmingly masculine, built to intimidate, and was shrouded in a terrifying, oppressive quiet. Alejandro entered right after her, and she heard the solid, final click of the heavy oak door as he locked it behind them. "Sit down," he said, gesturing with his hand toward a plush armchair upholstered in deep red velvet. Mia did not budge an inch. "I think I would rather stand." Alejandro let out a soft sigh and shrugged out of his perfectly tailored, expensive suit jacket, casually tossing it onto a nearby sofa. He started to roll up the sleeves of his crisp white shirt, which revealed powerful forearms that were thick with muscle. Mia noticed a pale, thin scar that traced a line down the inside of his left wrist. "Have it your way," he said, his tone indifferent. He walked over to a drink cart made of polished crystal and poured 2 generous measures of an amber-colored liquid into heavy glasses. He turned and held one of the glasses out in her direction. "I do not accept drinks from my kidnappers." "Have it your way," he said again, his voice unchanged. He then brought his own glass to his lips and downed the entire contents in one quick, fluid motion. He slammed the now empty glass back down on the cart, the sound cracking sharply in the silent room. "All right, Mia Collins, the time for games is over. Let us put all of our cards on the table. You are aware of the Victoria Ledger. You are aware of the blue sedan. What other secrets do you know? I know about the special shipment that is scheduled to arrive next Tuesday down at the docks. It is in container 404, Mia stated plainly. Her eyes were locked on his, searching for any sign, any small flicker of a reaction in his expression. Alejandro's eyes narrowed until they were dangerous slits. That information was a closely guarded secret. Only the most trusted members of his inner circle were aware of that illegal delivery. The delivery of unregistered firearms that is being shipped from Eastern Europe. He finished her sentence for her, and his voice was as cold and hard as ice. You have an informant inside my organization. Is that what this is? He concluded, his mind working quickly. Tell me who is feeding you this information. I do not have an informant, she replied, her voice steady. What I have are my father's journals. He wrote down everything your family ever did. He was able to predict your father's actions years before he ever made them. He had a deep understanding of how the Valente family operates. All of you are so terribly predictable. Predictable? The single word seemed to ignite a dangerous fire inside Alejandro. He crossed the entire room in just 2 long, purposeful strides, and the menacing glint had returned to his eyes. You believe that I am predictable? You are nothing more than a common thug dressed up in an expensive suit, Mia said. Her voice had a slight tremble now, but she defiantly raised her chin, refusing to look away. You get everything you could ever want by using fear and violence. It is pathetic and boring. Alejandro moved with a sudden burst of speed that completely stunned her. In a fraction of a second, he closed the little space that was left between them, effectively trapping her against a massive wall of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. He slammed his palms onto the shelves on either side of her head, caging her in and cutting off any possible escape. He was now close to her. He was far too close. She could physically feel the powerful heat that was radiating from his body. She could see the tiny, shimmering flecks of gold that swirled within his dark and furious eyes. If I were just a simple thug, Alejandro whispered, his voice a low, rough growl right next to her ear. You would have been dead a long time ago. Rocco would have put a bullet through your skull in the alley behind that diner. But you are still standing right here, breathing my air. Why do you suppose that is? Mia felt the air catch in her throat, unable to speak. Because you are terrified of the information that I possess. No, Alejandro said, and he leaned in even closer, so close that the tip of his nose lightly brushed against hers. It is because you are fascinating to me. In the last 5 years, you are the first person who has ever looked at me with something other than fear or greed. You look at me with a pure, undiluted hatred, and I find that incredibly refreshing. A powerful and confusing surge of adrenaline rushed through Mia's veins. She knew this man was a monster. He was the son of the very man who had systematically ruined her entire life, who had shattered her entire world. And yet, to be standing this close to him, to feel the raw, untamed power that he seemed to radiate from his very core, was a dangerously intoxicating experience. You are twisted, she managed to breathe out, her voice unsteady. I am a Valente, he replied instantly, as if that explained everything. It is essentially the same thing. He slowly lifted his hand and let his fingers graze along the side of her cheek. His thumb then gently traced the delicate line of her lower lip, and for a moment, Mia completely forgot how to breathe. Tell me something, Mia, he murmured, his intense eyes dropping to her mouth. If I decided to kiss you right now, would you try to bite me? Why don't you try it and find out, she challenged him, although her voice did not have the same conviction it had carried back at the diner. The very air in the library was now thick with a tension so real, it felt like a wire stretched to its absolute breaking point. Alejandro leaned in, slowly, deliberately closing the final charged gap between them. And then, a loud bang. The library door was kicked open with so much violent force that it crashed loudly against the interior wall. In a single fluid motion, Alejandro spun around, instinctively placing his own body in front of Mia, using himself as a human shield. A handgun materialized in his hand as if it had come from nowhere. It was Rocco. But Rocco was pale, his face a ghostly ashen color, filled with absolute terror. He was holding a phone out in a hand that was shaking uncontrollably. "Boss, you need to answer this call," Rocco stammered, his voice cracking. "I am a little busy right now," Alejandro roared, his weapon still aimed at the open, dark doorway. "It is your father," Rocco choked out, the words barely audible. "It is the Don. He is aware that she is in this house." Alejandro became completely and utterly still. He lowered his gun with a slow, measured, deliberate movement. He glanced back over his shoulder to look at Mia, but his expression was now completely impossible to read. "How does he know?" Alejandro asked, and his voice was now dangerously, chillingly quiet. "He said he has been having her tracked for weeks. He said she walked you directly into a trap that he set." Alejandro turned around to face Mia completely. The warmth that had been in his eyes was gone. The curiosity had completely vanished. The cold, hard espresso eyes were back, and they were looking at her as if she were the enemy. "Is that a fact?" Alejandro's voice was as cold and hard as granite. "Did you set this up? Were you leading me into some kind of trap?" This is the moment power shows its true face, when it decides who it will protect and who it will crush. Stick around to see which one she becomes. Mia could only stare at him, her face a canvas of pure terror and bewilderment. "No, I promise you," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "I told you everything. I came here all by myself." Before Rocco could react, Alejandro seized the phone from his grasp. "Father," he spoke into the device. A ragged, wet breathing clawed its way through the speaker, so loud that Mia heard every chilling word. "Alejandro, you naive, short-sighted boy. You have brought the vermin right into our home." A thick, rattling cough followed. "She is more than just the bookkeeper's daughter. She is an asset for the Russians. You have to eliminate her. Do it now." Alejandro's eyes locked with Mia's, and the weapon in his hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy, an anchor pulling him down. "That is not true!" Mia shrieked, her voice shattering with raw desperation. "I swear on my life, I despise the Russians as much as I despise your entire family. He's the one who is lying. He needs me gone because I know what he did, not what you did." "Finish it, Alejandro," the old Don's voice commanded, a venomous hiss from the phone. "Prove to me that you have what it takes to run this family. Send a bullet straight into her heart." Alejandro's gaze fell upon the terrified woman who was pressed against the towering bookshelf, trembling like a leaf in a storm. He looked down at the heavy, dark pistol that was a familiar weight in his palm. He glanced over at Rocco, who guarded the door, his face an unreadable slab of stone, awaiting the final command. With deliberate slowness, he lifted the gun. He sighted it carefully, aiming for the very center of Mia's chest. Mia squeezed her eyes shut so tightly that she saw stars. A single hot tear escaped and carved a path down her cold cheek. "This is how it ends," she thought, a crushing wave of despair washing over her soul. "I couldn't save him." Click. The crisp, mechanical sound of the safety being flicked off was a thunderclap in the absolute silence of the library. The gunshot that followed was a physical blow, a deafening explosion that ripped through the enclosed space. Mia cried out and flinched with all her might, her body tensing for the agonizing, white-hot pain of a bullet tearing through her flesh. But the pain never arrived. Instead, the expensive smartphone in Rocco's hand disintegrated into a spectacular burst of shattered glass and black plastic. Alejandro had not aimed at her. He had shot the phone. It exploded in a spray of fragments right out of his enforcer's hand. Rocco stared at his empty, stinging palm, his mouth agape as he looked up at his boss in total disbelief. "Boss, what was that?" he managed to say. "My father is getting old," Alejandro said. His voice was a calm, terrifyingly quiet ocean, his smoking pistol still aimed at Rocco. "He is getting careless. He initiated a call on an unsecured line. He ordered a kill inside a designated safe house without confirming the target's identity. That is not the Dawn I was raised to respect. That is the sound of a desperate, frightened old man trying to bury his sins. He gave you a direct order, Rocco stammered, his decades of loyalty cracking between the powerful father and the lethal son. If you don't follow through, he will dispatch the cleaners. You know the protocol. I know the protocol better than he does, Alejandro snapped, his patience finally gone. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbing Mia firmly by the arm. Get up. We are leaving this place immediately. Leaving? Mia repeated, her voice shaking violently. Her ears were still ringing with the echo of the gunshot. Where can we possibly go? And why didn't you kill me? Because you were not lying, Alejandro said, his sharp eyes already sweeping the grand library for any potential escape routes. If my father wants you eliminated this badly, it is definitely not because you are a spy for some rival faction. It is because you hold a truth that he has been hiding from me with a web of lies for 20 long years. He pulled her with force toward a set of elegant French doors that led out onto a wide stone terrace. Rocco, Alejandro called over his shoulder, his tone like chipped ice. You now have 2 paths in front of you. You can remain here and explain to the cleaning crew that I had a mental breakdown and abducted the girl. Or you can come with us and almost certainly die fighting in a war you had nothing to do with. Rocco looked from the glittering shards of his phone on the polished floor to the man he had served with unwavering loyalty since they were nothing more than ambitious teenagers. He drew his own pistol from its holster, professionally checked the chamber with a practiced motion, and released a long, heavy sigh. I have always despised the cleaning crew. They are so unprofessional, and they always leave a terrible mess. Rocco grunted with grim resolve. I am with you, boss. Good. Get to the garage. Take the Aston Martin. It has a much better power-to-weight ratio than the sport utility vehicle. They moved as one, sprinting down the cold marble hallway with a shared sense of purpose. The mansion, which was typically a fortress of absolute controlled silence, now felt like a vast, cold mausoleum that was about to be permanently sealed. Just as their hands reached for the heavy garage door, the perimeter alarms erupted into a deafening scream. It was a high-frequency, piercing wail designed to signal a catastrophic security breach. They are already on top of us, Alejandro cursed under his breath. He needed no visual confirmation. His father must have dispatched the hit squad before he had even hung up the phone. The enormous garage door groaned in protest as it slowly began to rise. On the other side, tires screeched violently on the smooth concrete as 3 identical black sedans performed a perfect drift, positioning themselves to completely block their only exit. Men in full black tactical gear poured out of the vehicles like angry wasps from a nest, their suppressed rifles already shouldered and aimed to fire. Get down! Alejandro roared as he violently shoved Mia behind a thick concrete support pillar, a split second before the air was filled with the quiet, deadly hiss of suppressed weapons. Bullets chewed into the solid stone of the pillar, sending a choking cloud of concrete dust into their stinging eyes. Mia was hyperventilating, her breath catching in her throat in ragged, terrified sobs. This was not some action sequence on a screen. This was brutally real. The sharp, acrid smell of burnt gunpowder, the sickening thud of lead striking steel, and the angry, muffled shouts of men whose only purpose was to end her life. Do you have any experience with firearms? Alejandro asked, his voice a low and urgent command as he pressed a spare magazine into her trembling hand. I am a waitress, she yelled back, her voice nearly lost in the cacophony of the firefight. You are a Valente target now, he countered without missing a beat. It is time for you to upgrade your professional skill set. He then handed her a compact, snub-nosed revolver that he had pulled from a concealed holster on his ankle. Point it in their general direction and squeeze the trigger. Just try not to shoot me or Rocco. Alejandro then leaned out from his cover, firing his own weapon with a practiced and lethal precision. 2 of the armored attackers crumpled to the ground and did not move again. From his position behind the sleek hood of the Aston Martin, Rocco laid down a steady rhythm of covering fire. The car is completely boxed in, Rocco shouted over the noise. There is no way we can drive out of this. Alejandro's eyes darted frantically around the garage. He spotted a service exit, a heavy steel door that he knew led down into the old, forgotten storm drains beneath the estate. It was a filthy, desperate escape route, but it was the only one they had left. The drains, Alejandro communicated with a sharp hand signal. They made a desperate, chaotic break for the door. Mia ran with a speed she never knew she was capable of, fueled by pure adrenaline. She could clearly hear the bullets whizzing past her ears, the sound like a swarm of angry, buzzing hornets. She fired the revolver blindly over her shoulder once, and then a second time. She had no clue if she hit anything, but the act of fighting back made the attackers hesitate and duck for cover. Together, they crashed through the service door. Alejandro immediately slammed the heavy deadbolt home and then, without a second thought, fired 2 rounds directly into the lock mechanism, fusing the metal parts together permanently. They were instantly plunged into absolute, disorienting darkness. The overwhelming stench of damp earth and raw sewage assaulted their senses and filled their lungs. "Keep moving forward," Alejandro ordered, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space of the narrow tunnel. He reached out in the blackness and took her hand. His grip was surprisingly warm and incredibly solid. In the heart of all this chaos, it was the one thing that kept her anchored to reality. "Where does this tunnel lead?" Mia gasped for air, stumbling on loose, wet stones she could not see in the dark. "It connects to the marina," Alejandro explained as he pulled her along. "I maintain a boat there that is completely off the books. My father has no knowledge of its existence because I acquired it through a shell corporation he was led to believe went bankrupt back in 2005. They ran for what felt like an entire lifetime. Mia's lungs burned with every single breath she took. Her legs felt like they were made of solid lead, but she refused to slow down. She knew that stopping meant death. When they finally stumbled out into the cool, damp night air, the marina was eerily peaceful and quiet. A heavy fog had rolled in off the water, completely swallowing the moon and the stars. Alejandro led them to a sleek, unassuming fishing trawler that was moored at the very farthest end of the pier, hidden in the deep shadows. The boat was a masterpiece of deception. On the surface, its hull showed the decay of age and the creeping stain of rust, but the moment Alejandro turned the key, the engines awoke with a deep, powerful thrum. It was the distinct growl of high-performance, military-grade machinery. Rocco moved with practiced speed, casting off the thick ropes that tethered them to the weathered dock. As the vessel began to glide away, swallowed by the thick, waiting fog, Mia finally collapsed onto the cold deck. She stared back toward the city skyline, a distant silhouette of glittering lights. She knew that somewhere in those shadowed hills, the safe house she had barely escaped was likely being consumed by fire. Just then, Alejandro stepped out from the boat's small cabin. He approached her and offered a bottle of water without a word. He looked utterly drained, his usual confidence stripped away by exhaustion. For the first time since she met him, the untouchable Dawn looked completely, vulnerably human. "You saved my life," Mia whispered, her voice a mix of shock and gratitude. "I saved my own," Alejandro corrected her, his eyes fixed on the dark, churning expanse of water ahead. "My own father put a price on his son's head. An act like that shatters the sacred code. The omerta is finished." He then shifted his intense gaze down to her, his expression hardening. "Now, you will tell me absolutely everything. What secrets are hidden in that ledger that would make a man want to kill his own flesh and blood?" Mia raised the bottle and took a long, slow drink of water. Her hands still trembled with a violent, uncontrollable tremor. Yet her voice, when she finally spoke, was surprisingly firm. "This was never just about money, Alejandro. It is about the year 1998. It is about the year your mother died." Alejandro went completely still, his entire body becoming as rigid as stone. "My mother died of cancer. The entire world knows this was the cause." "No," Mia said, her voice softening with a deep, genuine sorrow. "She did not. She was making plans to leave him. She was preparing to cooperate with federal investigators. She was the first informant. My father was helping her move the money so she could get out of the country and disappear safely. The words hit him like a physical blow. Alejandro fell to his knees in front of her, his hands gripping her shoulders with desperate force. "You are lying to me." "The blue sedan," Mia said, feeling her own tears begin to well and burn in her eyes. "The car from that day was not my father's. It was hers. That is where he put her body after he murdered her." Alejandro could only stare at her, his face a perfect frozen mask of a man whose reality had just been shattered into a million pieces. The boat continued its journey, cutting a clean path through the dark waves and carrying them deeper into the endless night. But the real storm, the true tempest, was only just beginning to form inside the young Don's heart. Their voyage on the water lasted for 3 long hours. They finally moored at a private island off the coast of Washington state, a secret refuge known as Isola di Vetro, the Glass Island. It was an astonishing marvel of modern design, a structure built almost entirely of reinforced glass and stark steel, balanced precariously on a cliff that stared down at the turbulent Pacific Ocean. This was Alejandro's real sanctuary. There were no bodyguards, no household staff, only the profound, deep silence punctuated by the constant roar of the sea. Rocco stayed with the boat to monitor communications and maintain a vigilant watch. Alejandro and Mia made the long trek up the cliff face to the house. The interior of the structure was as cold and unwelcoming as the ocean outside. Alejandro engaged the heating system and built a fire in the enormous stone fireplace. Then he poured 2 very large drinks. This time it was brandy. Mia stood perfectly still beside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, her eyes fixed on the powerful waves as they crashed against the sharp, jagged rocks far below. She had showered and changed her clothes, now wearing one of Alejandro's oversized dress shirts. The fabric carried his distinct scent, a complex mix of sandalwood and expensive pipe tobacco. "Do you possess the evidence?" Alejandro asked. He was sitting on a low couch, his attention completely focused on the dancing flames in the fireplace, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I have copies of every single page," Mia replied, turning her body to face him directly. "The original ledger is locked away in a safety deposit box in Zurich, Switzerland, but I have complete scans on a fully encrypted drive." "Show me," he commanded, his voice low and urgent. Mia walked over to the pile of her discarded, still damp clothing and retrieved a small, waterproof flash drive from a hidden pocket. She moved to the coffee table where Alejandro's laptop sat and inserted the drive. With a few clicks, she navigated to a specific file and opened it. The file was named Project Exit. Alejandro leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as the contents appeared on the screen. He saw scanned pages filled with elegant, flowing handwriting. He recognized it in a single heart-stopping instant. It was his mother's beautiful, looping script. He had not seen it in 20 years. He forced himself to read the entries, each word a blow. August 4th, 1998. Carlo knows everything. I found the listening device he hid in the study. The way he looks at me has completely changed. It is no longer with love, but with a cold, terrifying calculation. I have to get Alejandro out of this house. August 10th, 1998. Arthur, who was Mia's father, confirmed that the funds are secured. Our departure is scheduled for Tuesday. I told Alejandro we are taking a special trip to Disneyland. He is so wonderfully excited about it. August 12th, 1998. He stopped the car on the side of the highway. He knows it all. Dear God, please help us. The final entry was not even a complete sentence. It was just a desperate, jagged scrawl of ink, the mark left where the pen must have fallen from her hand in her last moments of life. Alejandro leaned back against the couch, all the color draining from his face. A single, solitary tear escaped from his eye, cutting a clean, pale track through the grime on his cheek. He made no effort to wipe it away. "He told me that she died in the hospital," Alejandro whispered, his voice cracking under the weight of the memory. I was only 8 years old. He held my hand at her funeral. He cried right there beside me. He told me, "We have to be strong for Mama now." He stood up with sudden, violent motion and hurled his glass directly into the fireplace. The brandy ignited with an explosive whoosh, a brilliant and sudden burst of blue and orange flame. "He killed her!" Alejandro roared, the 20 years of suppressed rage finally erupting from him. He murdered his own wife, and then he spent my entire life raising me to be just like him. He deliberately molded me into a monster that was a reflection of his own twisted soul. He began to stalk around the room like a caged animal, vibrating with a raw, untamed, and destructive energy. Mia did not so much as flinch. Instead, she walked straight toward him and placed a gentle hand flat against his chest. "You are not him," she said plainly. Alejandro looked down at her, his eyes wild with agony and confusion. "How can you possibly say that to me? I threatened your life. I abducted you. I have so much blood on my hands, Mia. I have spilled gallons and gallons of it." "You are not him," she repeated, her voice now even more firm and unwavering. "He killed innocent people just to protect his own power. You are fighting to protect—" "I do not know what I am fighting for anymore," he confessed, the rage draining out of him, his broad shoulders slumping forward in utter defeat. He covered her hand with his own, holding it to his chest. "I have nothing left. My entire family was built on a lie. My so-called empire is nothing more than a graveyard built on secrets." "You have the truth now," Mia said softly. "And because of that, you have a choice." The entire feeling in the room changed in that instant. The raw, violent anger started to fade away, replaced by a powerful and undeniable magnetic pull that had been slowly building between them since they first met in the diner. They were two orphans created by the very same war, now standing together in a fragile house made of glass at the edge of the known world. For the first time, Alejandro truly saw her. He looked past the exhaustion that clung to her like a shroud and saw the unbending steel that formed her core. He saw the little girl who had lost her beloved father and somehow survived to become the woman who was now trying to save him from himself. "Why did you not just run away?" His voice was a low, rough whisper. "Back there in the garage. You had the perfect chance to disappear into the city." "I already told you why," Mia said quietly, closing the last bit of distance between them until they were almost touching. "I came back here for justice, and I was not going to leave you to face that man by yourself." A heavy, ragged breath escaped Alejandro's lungs. He gently brought his large hands up to cup her face, his thumbs stroking away a dark smudge of dirt from her cheekbone. "You are a dangerous woman, Mia Collins," he murmured, his voice filled with a sense of wonder. "More dangerous than any weapon I have ever held in my hands." And then he kissed her. It was not a gentle or tender kiss. It was a desperate, hungry collision, a raw and primal act fueled by the day's surging adrenaline and a grief so profound it felt like drowning. It was a sudden, overwhelming need to feel something, anything at all, other than the sharp sting of ultimate betrayal. Mia met his desperate energy with a matching force of her own, kissing him back with equal intensity as her fingers tangled themselves deeply in his dark, thick hair. This was the violent, chaotic impact of two entirely separate worlds colliding to become one. He was the feared Dawn, and she was the humble Waitress. He was the story's villain, and she was supposed to be his victim. In one single, fluid motion, he lifted her up onto the edge of the massive oak table. The open laptop, its screen still glowing with the evidence of their shared, tragic history, sat right beside them, completely ignored in that powerful moment. "I am going to burn his entire world to the ground," Alejandro vowed, his words a harsh promise spoken against her lips. "For every single thing he did to our families, for all the pain he caused us." "We will," Mia corrected him, her voice breathless but absolutely firm. "Together, we will burn it all down to ashes." For the rest of that long and difficult night, the storm howled relentlessly outside, hurling sheets of rain against the reinforced glass walls of their isolated sanctuary. But inside, for a little while, They had finally found a small, temporary refuge in one another's arms. It was the profound stillness that comes just before the declaration of war. Morning broke across a cold, steel-gray sky. The desperate, frantic energy of the previous night had cooled and hardened into something unbreakable, a shared resolve. Alejandro stood alone on the deck of the boat. The morning light glinted off the tactical suit he wore, a spare he always kept ready at the safe house. He was methodically breaking down and cleaning a semi-automatic rifle, each and every movement precise, economical, and deliberate. The change in him was both startling and absolute. The confused, betrayed son had been completely erased. In his place stood a warlord, but this time his war was not for territory or for profit. This war was for his own soul, and his primary target was his own father's throne. Mia came out from the cabin below, holding 2 steaming mugs of black coffee. She had discovered a plain black sweater and a pair of jeans in a storage closet, likely left behind by one of Alejandro's past lovers. She felt no jealousy, only a strange and unexpected sense of purpose. "Rocco has an update," Alejandro stated flatly, his eyes never leaving the weapon in his hands. "My father has officially declared war on me. He has put a price on my head, a $10 million open contract." He paused. "That means every professional killer from Chicago all the way to Naples is now actively hunting us." "That is a very substantial amount of money," Mia noted, her tone laced with a dry, dark humor. "Perhaps I should have turned you over to the authorities when I had the opportunity." For the very first time, Alejandro allowed a small smirk to appear. It was not a sneer, but a genuine smile, a brief glimpse of the man hidden beneath all the layers of armor. "You missed your window of opportunity. Now, you are my accomplice in this." "So," she asked, crossing her arms, "what is our plan now?" "We cannot go into hiding," Alejandro said, snapping the rifle's magazine firmly back into its place with a sharp, definitive metallic click. "If we make any attempt to hide, they will simply begin to hunt us, and it is only a matter of time before they find us. We have to be proactive and take the fight to them. We need to cut the head off of the snake." He paused, his eyes focused. "We are going directly to him." "Tonight is the evening of the annual Valente Charity Gala," Alejandro went on, his voice dropping to a low, strategic tone. "It is the single most important social gathering of the entire year. The governor will be in attendance, as will the police commissioner, the judges, and every other person of importance will be gathered in that single room. My father uses the event as a convenient cover to launder his money and to strengthen his political alliances. He will be surrounded by hundreds of armed guards." Mia pointed out the most obvious and dangerous problem with his plan. "Exactly," Alejandro agreed with a grim nod. "He will believe he is completely safe. He will feel as if he is absolutely untouchable. He would be watching the front door, expecting a frontal assault. He would never anticipate that I would simply walk right in." "You are not seriously considering walking through the main entrance, are you?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "No." A dangerous fire flickered deep in Alejandro's eyes, a reflection of his audacious plan. "We are going to enter the estate through the vault itself." The entire scheme was breathtakingly insane, a testament to pure desperation. Its potential for success rested entirely on 2 fragile pillars. The first was Rocco's encyclopedic knowledge of the estate's intricate and layered security grid. The second was Mia's sharp understanding of the hidden financial passageways within the corrupt Valente empire. The Valente estate, the chosen location for the lavish gala, concealed a panic room buried deep within its foundation. This reinforced chamber also served as a virtually impenetrable vault. Alejandro knew with absolute certainty that his father kept the physical copies of all his current blackmail material stored safely within its walls. If they could somehow get their hands on the hard evidence of the judge's payoffs and the detailed maps of the current drug trafficking routes, and then combine that with the 1998 ledger, they could completely and utterly ruin him in the court of public opinion. Their ultimate objective was to broadcast all of this damning information onto the enormous screens inside the ballroom, right in the middle of the event. They finally made their arrival at the sprawling, fortified estate, inside a simple catering delivery van that Rocco had so skillfully commandeered earlier that day. Alejandro and Rocco were perfectly disguised as invisible members of the catering staff. Mia's disguise was far more daring. She was dressed as a high-end companion, a clever costume that would grant her the freedom to move unnoticed among the glittering crowd of corrupt and powerful elites. "Stay close to the senator," Alejandro's voice whispered urgently into her tiny earpiece as he nervously adjusted his crooked bow tie. He was carefully carrying a large silver tray, which was loaded with delicate champagne flutes. "He is our only key to getting past the first major security checkpoint." Mia, who looked absolutely breathtaking in a stunning crimson dress that Rocco had somehow managed to procure, was walking arm in arm with a slightly bewildered and elderly senator she had successfully charmed at the main entrance. With him as her shield, she glided effortlessly right past the sensitive metal detectors without so much as a second glance from the guards. The ballroom was a dizzying, overwhelming spectacle of sparkling diamonds and suffocating hypocrisy. At the main table, positioned at the very front of the massive room, sat Don Carlo Valente himself. He looked shockingly and pitifully frail. He was confined to a wheelchair, and he was breathing with the visible assistance of a large, cumbersome oxygen tank. But Alejandro knew it was all a carefully constructed and masterfully performed lie. He knew his father was still as strong and vital as an ox. This elaborate performance of frailty was nothing more than a strategic act, a charade designed to generate sympathy and, more importantly, to help him avoid a looming federal prosecution. A cold, icy shiver traced its way slowly down Mia's spine as she stared at him from across the crowded room. That was the monster who had ordered her own father's brutal death. "I am in position," Mia whispered into the tiny microphone that was cleverly hidden inside her elegant brooch. "I am positioned right near the audiovisual control room." "Copy that," Alejandro's calm voice replied instantly in her ear. "Rocco and I are currently at the service elevator. We are on our way down to the vault right now." The entire complicated heist was proceeding without a single solitary problem. In fact, it was all going far too smoothly, with an unnatural ease that made the hairs on Alejandro's arms stand on end. Down in the cold, sterile basement corridor, Alejandro and Rocco expertly neutralized the two guards standing watch at the vault entrance with their silenced pistols. Two soft, muffled coughs, a quiet foot-foot, and it was all over in a matter of seconds. They quickly and efficiently dragged the lifeless bodies into a nearby utility closet and shut the door. Alejandro then used his own thumbprint to unlock the first heavy, reinforced door. In a moment of either extreme arrogance or a critical, fatal oversight, his father had not yet bothered to revoke his biometric security access. They stepped carefully into the small, cramped antechamber. Without a moment's hesitation, Alejandro immediately began drilling into the heavy physical lock of the inner vault door. Meanwhile, 2 floors directly above them, Mia could feel tiny beads of cold sweat forming on her forehead. She had been given the critical and time-sensitive task of uploading all the incriminating files from the drive to the gala's main projector system. She slipped completely unnoticed into the thankfully empty audio-visual room. Her hands trembled just slightly as she carefully plugged the small flash drive into the main console. A familiar upload progress bar appeared on the monitor. 10% complete, 20%. Suddenly, without any warning, the door to the room swung open wide behind her. Mia froze in place, her heart hammering violently inside her chest. It was not a security guard standing in the doorway. It was Don Carlo himself. He was not in his wheelchair. He stood tall and straight, leaning his weight on a heavy, ornate cane with a polished golden lion's head for a handle. He was flanked on either side by 4 enormous bodyguards who looked as if they were carved from solid granite. "Hello, my dear." Don Carlo smiled. It was a cold, reptilian smile that did not even begin to reach his dark, empty eyes. "Did you truly believe for a second," that I would not recognize my own son, entering the very building where I personally taught him how to sneak around as a small child. I know the sound of his footsteps like I know my own. Mia slowly began to back away, pressing herself against the large, cold mixing desk. "You knew," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I knew everything," Carlo wheezed, the sound of his voice like dry, dead leaves skittering across a cold pavement. "I allowed all of you to get this far. It makes the final, crushing victory so much sweeter for me." He tapped his heavy cane sharply on the polished floor for emphasis. "Cut the feed. Now." One of the massive guards stepped forward and smashed the laptop with a single brutal downward strike of his fist. The upload failed at 85%. So close to freedom. "Bring her," Carlo ordered his men, his voice a low growl. "We are going down to the vault. I want Alejandro to have a front row seat to watch you die right before I kill him myself." Deep below them in the basement, the heavy steel door of the inner vault finally swung open. Alejandro smiled wide in triumph. "We are in." He stepped confidently across the threshold, fully prepared to seize the documents that would finally bring his monstrous father down. But the vault was completely and utterly empty. There were no shelves, no towering stacks of money, no folders full of incriminating files, just a single solitary chair sitting in the exact center of the cold, bare concrete room. And on that chair sat a small tablet computer, its screen displaying a crystal-clear live video feed. The image on the screen showed Mia, held firmly at gunpoint by his father's men in what looked like the ballroom kitchen. All the blood in Alejandro's body turned instantly to ice. "It is a trap," Rocco whispered with urgency, quickly raising his weapon to scan the empty room. In that exact same instant, the massive steel door they had just come through slammed shut with terrifying force behind them. The series of heavy industrial locks engaged with a sequence of final, deafening thuds that sealed their fate. A faint, almost imperceptible hissing sound began to emanate from the small air vents in the ceiling. It was gas. Alejandro rushed to the door, pounding his fist uselessly against the cold, solid metal. The door was reinforced titanium. It was absolutely indestructible. The tablet screen on the chair flickered to life, and Don Carlo's cruel face filled the entire display. "You have disappointed me greatly, Alejandro." The Don's voice, tinny and distorted by the small speaker, echoed ominously within the sealed vault. "You chose a common, worthless waitress over your own flesh and blood. And for that, now you will have the distinct privilege of watching her die while you slowly and painfully suffocate. It is a truly poetic end to your rebellion, do you not think?" Alejandro could only stare, horrified and helpless, at the terrible screen. He could see Mia struggling desperately against her captors. He saw one of the guards press the cold, unfeeling barrel of a gun directly to her temple. He was completely trapped inside a steel box, buried miles beneath the earth, and his own air supply was quickly running out. And the woman he had grown to love was about to be executed on a live video feed for his viewing pleasure. He turned his desperate, wild eyes to Rocco. Rocco was already coughing hard, the toxic gas already beginning to take its cruel effect on his lungs. "We have maybe 3 minutes left at the most?" Alejandro coughed, pulling the sleeve of his jacket over his mouth and nose in a futile attempt to filter the air. "Rocco, I need you to give me the C4. "Boss?" Rocco's eyes widened with genuine alarm. "If we use the explosive in here, it will kill us both instantly. The shockwave from the blast will be contained and magnified." "We are dead either way," Alejandro said, his gaze locked firmly on the terrible, heartbreaking image of Mia on the tablet. "If we manage to blow the door, we might have a slim chance to survive this. If we do nothing, our death is absolutely certain. Give me the charge, now." Rocco hesitated for only a single second before handing him the dense, heavy brick of plastic explosive. Alejandro moved quickly, slapping it onto the massive, fortified hinges of the vault door. He knew it was a complete and total suicide mission. The immense contained pressure from a blast in such a small enclosed space would certainly rupture their eardrums and possibly even collapse their lungs from the inside out. "Cover your ears and open your mouth wide," Alejandro yelled over his own violent, racking coughing. He took one last, lingering look at the tablet screen. "Hold on, Mia. Just hold on." Then he pressed the detonator. A single final click. Boom! The entire world dissolved into a blinding flash of pure white light and unbearable pressure. The explosion was not a sound that could be heard by human ears. It was a physical, concussive blow that felt like it had struck his very soul and torn it from his body. Down in the subterranean level of the sprawling estate, the reinforced titanium door did not simply open. It was violently ripped from its very hinges, twisting and spinning through the air like a discarded piece of wet cardboard. The resulting shockwave was immense and unforgiving, slamming Alejandro and Rocco with brutal force against the unforgiving back wall of the vault. The air was instantly and violently vacuumed out of the room, only to be immediately replaced by a searing wave of intense heat and the thick, choking dust of pulverized concrete. For what felt like an endless eternity, there was only oppressive, suffocating darkness and the high-pitched, screaming whine of his severely damaged eardrums. Alejandro coughed hard, a violent spasm that expelled thick, gray dust from his burning lungs. His vision was swimming in and out of a blurry, distorted focus. He could not hear a single thing, but he could feel the deep, resonant vibration of the entire building settling precariously above their heads. He cautiously touched his forehead. His hand came away slick, wet, and dark with his own blood. "Rocco," he managed to croak out, but the sound that came from his throat was strangely distorted and muffled, as if he were attempting to speak from the bottom of a deep body of water. He saw that Rocco was slumped over in a corner of the demolished vault. A jagged and sharp piece of metal debris was embedded deep in his shoulder. Rocco let out a low, pained groan, but he found the strength to give a weak thumbs up. He was still alive. Alejandro used all of his strength to force himself back onto his feet. His ribs screamed at him in a protest of white-hot agony. He was almost certain they were cracked, but the image of Mia's face from that tablet screen was burned into the front of his mind, a raging fire that was strong enough to override all of the physical pain. "She only has a few minutes," he told himself, and his thoughts became a desperate, repeating mantra. "It is possible she only has a few seconds left." He stumbled his way through the smoking, jagged opening where the massive vault door had been just moments before. The hallway just outside was a scene of utter and complete devastation. The guards who had so gleefully trapped them inside were now gone, either buried deep beneath the tons of collapsed rubble, or they had fled in sheer terror. Alejandro's eyes scanned the debris, and he spotted a discarded automatic pistol lying on the floor among the wreckage. He quickly picked it up and checked the clip. It was full. He did not try to run. He was too badly injured for that. Instead, he began to walk. He moved through the darkness with the purpose of a man who had already died. The service corridors were a tangled maze of concrete and shadow, but he navigated them with a terrible certainty, climbing endless flights of stairs toward the grand ballroom above. With every step, the identity of Alejandro Valente peeled away like sunburnt skin. The dutiful prince, sworn to uphold a rotten dynasty, was gone. In his place, an inferno was building, a man willing to burn down his entire world just to save the one person who gave it meaning. High above, the luxurious gala had shattered into beautiful chaos. The floor had heaved from the explosion deep below, sending crystal chandeliers swinging like monstrous pendulums. Towers of champagne glasses had collapsed, showering the marble in a glittering carpet of broken glass. Someone screamed that it was an earthquake, a natural disaster. But Don Carlo Valente knew better. He stood on the raised stage, a king watching his kingdom tremble, his knuckles bone white as he gripped the silver head of his cane. He recognized that deep, violent tremor for what it truly was. It was the sound of a problem being solved, a final, decisive burial beneath tons of stone and steel. With a subtle flick of his wrist, he signaled his men. They emerged from the velvet curtains, dragging a defiant Mia between them. She was bruised, and her magnificent red gown was torn, but her chin was held high, a beacon of defiance. Her gaze swept across the terrified faces of the city's elite, before landing on Carlo with a look of pure, cold fury. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, your attention." Carlo's voice, amplified by the microphone, was a thunderclap of authority that instantly calmed the room. The corrupt judges, the bought senators, and the wealthy parasites all turned to him, their fear melting into familiar obedience. "We seem to have a minor issue with a gas line in the kitchen." Carlo lied with the effortless grace of a man who had never known truth. "The situation is perfectly under control." Before we resume our festivities, however, we must handle a small matter of internal discipline. He swept his hand out in a grand, theatrical gesture toward Mia. "This woman," Carlo announced, his voice ringing with a carefully practiced outrage, "is an industrial spy. She infiltrated our celebration tonight with the express purpose of destroying our charitable efforts. She conspired to frame this honorable family with vicious lies." Mia struggled against the two hulking guards who held her arms in a crushing grip. "That is a lie," she screamed, her voice cracking with a mixture of desperate anger and pain. "He is the real criminal. He murdered his own wife in cold blood. He is the one who killed Arthur Collins. All the evidence is in the vault. The vault is gone." Carlo leaned in close, his voice a sibilant whisper only she could hear, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "And my son, your precious Alejandro, is buried with it. You have lost everything." The word struck Mia with the force of a physical blow. The strength drained from her limbs and her knees buckled. Alejandro. His name was a choked, broken sound that barely escaped her lips. The fight was over. It had been extinguished by a tidal wave of grief so profound it stole the air from her lungs. If Alejandro was gone, truly gone, then nothing else mattered. The ledger, justice, revenge, it all turned to meaningless ash in her mouth. "Get her out of my sight," Carlo commanded his guards, his voice booming for the benefit of his most important guests. "Call the police. I want her charged with trespassing and assault." Then, he leaned in one last time, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper meant only for her. "Take her down to the coast. See that she has a fatal accident on the rocks." The guards tightened their grip, beginning to drag her lifeless body toward a side exit. A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. They could feel the darkness coiling in the room, but they were too cowed by the Valente name to utter a single word of protest. At that exact moment, the enormous double doors at the far end of the ballroom did not simply open. They were blown from their very hinges, exploding inward in a deafening blast of splintered wood and twisted metal. An absolute stunned silence fell over the entire hall. Framed in the ruined doorway, silhouetted against the smoke, stood Alejandro. He looked like a spirit of vengeance that had clawed its way out of hell itself. His expensive suit was shredded, caked in a thick layer of plaster dust and stained with wide patches of dark, wet blood. His face was a horrifying mask of gray soot and angry red gashes, but his eyes, those deep espresso-dark eyes, were locked on his father with the chilling promise of a final reckoning. "Alejandro!" Carlo gasped, the blood draining from his face as if he were staring at a ghost. He stumbled backward, his hand fumbling for the podium to keep from falling. "That is not possible." Alejandro began to walk down the long central aisle. The most powerful people in the city, men and women who commanded fortunes and armies, scrambled away from him. They parted like the Red Sea, utterly terrified by the aura of raw, focused violence that rolled off him in waves. "Let her go," Alejandro commanded. His voice was not loud, but in the tomb-like silence of the ballroom, it had the force of a physical impact. The two guards holding Mia froze solid. Their eyes darted nervously from the bloody apparition walking toward them to the old man on the stage who signed their paychecks. "Kill him now!" Carlo shrieked, his elegant composure shattering into a million pieces of raw panic. "He is insane! He has come here to kill me! Shoot him down like a dog!" At his father's command, the four bodyguards positioned near the stage drew their weapons, the metallic clicks echoing in the silence as they took aim. No, Mia screamed, a surge of pure adrenaline flooding her body with newfound strength. She bit down hard on the hand of the guard restraining her, and at the same time, stomped the razor-sharp heel of her shoe onto his instep with every ounce of her weight. The man howled in agony, his grip slackening for just a second. Mia did not run. She launched herself toward the audio-visual table set up near the side of the stage. The laptop was a mangled ruin of shattered plastic, completely destroyed, but its core system remained connected to the cloud server through a wireless link. The data transfer had been violently interrupted. It had stopped at 85%. Please, please, just work, she whispered like a prayer, her fingers flying across the smooth surface of the audio mixing board. She did not need the laptop to complete the transfer. She just needed to activate the single, isolated audio channel she had prepared and queued up just before Carlo's men had captured her. Alejandro continued his steady, relentless march forward. The bodyguards opened fire. The sound of gunshots was deafening in the enclosed space. Alejandro did not break his stride. He did not even flinch. He raised his own weapon and fired two precise shots. Two of the guards crumpled to the floor. He had become something beyond human, a machine moving through a world of agony, fueled by a lifetime of rage and betrayal. He finally reached the steps leading to the stage. His own gun was now empty. He tossed it aside with a clatter and began to climb. The two remaining guards charged down to meet him. Alejandro caught the first man's fist, twisting his arm until the sharp crack of breaking bone echoed through the hall. He used that man's body as a shield against the second guard, then threw them both aside as if they weighed nothing at all. At last, he stood before his father. Don Carlo was shaking from head to toe, a pathetic, trembling old man. He raised his heavy, ornate cane to strike, but Alejandro snatched it from the air with effortless grace. With a single, powerful motion, he wrenched the cane from his father's grasp and snapped it over his knee. The sound was clean and final. "It is over, father," Alejandro said, his voice as cold and empty as a tomb. "You ungrateful parasite," Carlo spat, his face a twisted mask of pure hatred. "I gave you everything. I built this entire city for you." "You built a cage," Alejandro corrected him, his voice flat and grim. "And you filled it with the ghosts of everyone you destroyed." In the ringing silence that followed, a new sound filled the ballroom. It was a voice, a recording, amplified to an impossible volume by the massive concert speakers on either side of the stage. Mia had done it. She had triggered the audio file. It was not the financial ledger. It was the secret recording Alejandro had made in the library just the night before. "Alejandro, you are nothing but a foolish and sentimental boy. You must kill her right now. Do it this instant, Alejandro. You need to prove to me that you have finally become ready to take charge of this family. Place a single bullet precisely into her heart." Just then, a second audio recording started to broadcast. This particular clip was significantly older, carefully digitized from the hidden archives that Mia's father had secretly compiled over many, many years. It was a telephone recording that dated back to the year 1998. "Arthur, it is now your duty to watch over the boy. I am left with no choice but to put Victoria into the cold ground. She has been speaking far too much for her own good." The blue sedan is fueled, waiting, and completely ready to go. The entire ballroom was plunged into a silence so absolute that it felt like a physical weight, pressing in on everyone. A well-known senator who was seated in the front row let his crystal champagne flute fall from his trembling fingers, where it shattered into 1,000 pieces on the polished marble floor. The city's own police commissioner, who had been savoring a premium scotch in the exclusive VIP section, very slowly and with immense deliberation, set his heavy glass down on the table beside him. The confession was now public knowledge. It was out in the open, it was entirely irrefutable, a perfect admission of a cold-blooded murder and a widespread criminal conspiracy. A panicked Carlo desperately scanned the faces in the room. He could witness the transformation occurring in their eyes in real time. The terror they had once held for him was evaporating before his very eyes, being replaced by a frosty, calculating judgment. All the sharks that filled this extravagant room could now smell the scent of blood in the water, and for the very first time in his long and brutal life, the blood was his own. "Turn that device off!" Carlo shrieked, aiming a shaking finger toward the sound booth at the back of the hall. "That recording is a complete fabrication. It is a product of artificial intelligence. It is nothing more than an absolute lie." But not one person made a single move to come to his aid. The wail of police sirens started as a distant cry, but grew steadily louder and louder, rapidly closing in on the Grand Hotel. Alejandro gazed down upon his father, not with any sense of hatred, but with a profound and overwhelming feeling of pity. "That same blue sedan was recovered from the bottom of the lake early this morning, father. I arranged for Rocco's cousins to retrieve it for me while you and I were out on the boat. They also recovered the human remains that were still inside. You should know that deoxyribonucleic acid does not lie." Carlo appeared to physically collapse into himself. Every ounce of air, every last bit of his fight, seemed to rush out of his body. In that single devastating moment, he simply looked like a small, old, and utterly pathetic man. "I did everything for the well-being of the family," he managed to whisper. "No," Alejandro stated, turning his back on the shattered man before him. "You did all of it for yourself." Alejandro then walked straight to Mia, who was standing right next to the soundboard, with silent tears freely flowing down her cheeks. He paid no attention to the blood, the settling dust, or the tactical teams of police officers that were now swarming through the main entrance of the ballroom. He simply wrapped his powerful arms all the way around her and buried his face into the soft crook of her neck, holding on to her as if his very life depended on it. She held him just as tightly, using her own strength to support his completely exhausted body. "We actually managed to do it," she sobbed quietly into his shoulder. "It is truly, finally done," he murmured back to her, his voice thick with emotion. As the uniformed police officers secured Don Carlo Valente in a pair of shiny handcuffs and began to escort him out of his own magnificent gala, the blinding white flashbulbs from the news reporters documented the concluding moments of a fallen king's reign. But the single photograph that would genuinely seize the world's attention was the one that was unfolding right in the middle of the ruined ballroom. The Mafia prince and the fiercely determined waitress, each one holding the other up as they stood together among the wreckage of a collapsed criminal empire. They were, after so much pain and so long a time, finally free. 6 months after that night, a cheerful little bell jingled above the front door of S's 24-hour Eats. The diner itself had undergone a complete and total transformation. The old linoleum floors were freshly polished until they gleamed and were immaculately clean. The broken neon sign out front had been fully repaired and now cast a warm glow, and the stale, lingering odor of old cooking grease had been thoroughly replaced by the rich, wonderfully inviting aroma of freshly brewed, high-quality Arabica coffee beans. Mia was positioned behind the gleaming counter, but she was not wearing her familiar waitress uniform any longer. Instead, she was meticulously reviewing a ledger, the fully legitimate business ledger for the thriving diner that she was now the very proud owner of. The door swung open once more, and a man confidently walked inside. He was now dressed in a simple, well-worn leather jacket and a comfortable pair of denim jeans. There was no sign of an expensive tailored suit, and there were certainly no bodyguards flanking him on either side. The scars that once marked his face had mostly healed and faded away, leaving behind only faint white lines that now just added a touch of rugged character to his already handsome features. It was Alejandro. He walked over to the counter and effortlessly slid onto one of the newly upholstered stools. "Can I possibly get you some coffee?" Mia asked him, as a genuinely warm smile spread slowly across her beautiful face. "Only if you can personally guarantee that it is a fresh pot," he replied to her, a playful and familiar sparkle dancing in his eyes. "I just brewed this entire pot myself," she happily confirmed. She poured him a full, steaming cup. "So, tell me, how did everything go for you today?" The legal team has officially confirmed that the asset liquidation is now 100% complete, Alejandro reported, before taking a long, slow sip of the hot coffee. The Valente crime syndicate has ceased to exist. Every last bit of the money that was generated from the auction of the entire estate has been successfully transferred into a dedicated fund for the families of the victims. Every single dollar of it went to them. Every last cent, Alejandro confirmed, his voice firm with conviction. I only kept just enough money to purchase a small house up the coast and a modest boat. A real fishing boat this time. He reached his hand across the wide counter and gently, tenderly, took hers in his. But I now find myself in desperate need of a good first mate. Mia took a moment to glance around her newly renovated diner. This little place had been her entire world for so long, her one true sanctuary from the storm. But as she looked directly into Alejandro's eyes, she knew with an unshakable certainty that her life was no longer about a specific place. Her life was now about a person. I have a feeling that S can probably manage this place without me for a little while, Mia said, her hands already moving to untie the strings of her apron. He has been asking me for a well-deserved promotion after all. She carefully folded the clean apron and placed it neatly on the countertop. So, where exactly are we going? She asked him, her voice filled with anticipation. This time, Alejandro did not reach into his pocket to pull out a thick stack of $100 bills. Instead, he produced a small, simple ring. It was an elegant piece, with no blood diamonds, and it carried only the immense weight of a promise for a much better and brighter future together. We can go anywhere we want to go, he said softly. No more secrets to hide, no more shadows to lurk in, just the two of us. Mia leaned forward across the counter and gave him a long, deep, and heartfelt kiss. It was the kind of kiss that tasted of fresh morning coffee, the clean scent of a summer rain, and the wonderfully sweet relief of ultimate freedom. Outside the diner's windows, the rain continued to fall and wash over the sprawling city of Seattle, but for the very first time in more than 20 long years, the city itself actually felt clean. And that, my friends, brings us to the absolutely incredible conclusion of the tale of the Mafia boss and the waitress. From a perilous first meeting inside a humble diner to the complete and utter collapse of a powerful and ruthless criminal empire, Alejandro and Mia proved to all of us that the truth is always the single most potent weapon that you can ever wield. I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this emotional roller coaster filled with high-stakes drama, unexpected romance, and finally, ultimate justice. If you truly loved following along with their amazing journey, please take just a moment to hit that like button. It provides a massive boost to our channel. What are your final thoughts on Alejandro's difficult path to his own redemption? Do you honestly believe that Don Carlo received the kind of ending that he truly deserved? I would be thrilled to hear all of your thoughts and opinions, so please be sure to leave them for me in the comments section down below. And if you have not yet done so, I would be so grateful if you would please subscribe to the channel and make sure to turn on all of your notifications. I have a completely brand new story that is scheduled to be released next week about a billionaire who actually banned his very own mother from attending his wedding ceremony. You will not be able to believe the absolutely incredible reason why he did it. Thank you all so much for watching today, and I promise I will see you all again in the very next video.